This guitar build is all about natural contrast by using some of my favourite woods and getting classic tone from using some fantastic vintage voiced P90s. So while I start making the neck, let's have a talk through the plan. This will be a set neck electric guitar. I have a single piece Sapele body and neck. I also have a matching Okoume top and back, a Redheart fretboard with flamed maple binding and veneers on both the body and the neck. I really love all the thought and the detail that goes into making acoustic guitars. Those small embellishments, things like multi-layer binding, pinstriping, and the really careful choice of woods. And what I would love to do this year is to bring that level of detail and care into my electric guitar builds, starting with this one. The feel and the sound of the guitar always has to come first, that's just a prerequisite. But I was a furniture builder, I was a woodworker long before I ever started building guitars, so the aesthetic side of it, the woodwork side, is something that really excites me about each build. Picking the wood is one of my favourite parts of the build. So I figure if you're going to put the time in to build something yourself, spend the time to make it look really special. And lots of the time that involves quite a bit more time and effort, but adding those small details and that care and attention, I think, is what a custom guitar should be, for me at least. And one of those details for this build was picking out this beautiful Redheart fretboard that will darken, richen and become really vibrant under finish. These small silicone blocks that you'll see throughout this video, I actually designed with my friend Todd as an improvement over traditional bench cookies, and we make and sell these now, so I'll pop a link to them in the description for anybody that would like to get a set. With the fretboard going onto the neck, this is probably a good time to talk through the spec for the guitar. This will be a 22 fret guitar on a 24.6 inch scale length, which is what you typically think of as a Gretsch scale length. The thickness of the neck is going to be 20.5 millimeters at the first fret to around 23 millimeters at the 15th fret, which is what most people would consider a slim taper neck. And I'm also going to do a perfect C-shaped profile. And the tool that I have just used to pop the 12-inch radius on the fretboard is a fantastic tool that I got from Nocetti Custom Guitars, so it's another great purchase if you're a guitar builder, and I'll also leave a link to that in the description. Now I can move on to the first really decorative part of the build, and a bit that I really love. Cutting the binding channels along the edge of the fretboard, heat bending the wood and installing the flamed maple binding. This should give me a really nice contrast between the fretboard and the neckwood, both of which are quite dark. And it should help to tie the body and the neck together, because I'll also be double binding the body with flamed maple. I'm not going to shave the binding all the way back down to the fretboard at this point. I'll pop the fret dots in first. I'm not going to use the standard 6mm big fret dots that you tend to see in mainstream guitars. Instead, I'm going to use small 4mm mother of pearl dot inlays. Once those are in, I'll sand and polish up the fretboard and pop some side dots on. This is a wonderful point to be at in the build because I can see all the complexities of the wood grain now that the fretboard is polished up, but I can also see how much it's going to transform and how much more vibrant it's going to be as soon as I put some finish on. And with the side dots installed, the last thing that remains for me to do before I move on and start the body is to get the transition done between the fretboard and the headstock and to install the frets. I'm not going to carve the neck until I've finished the body. It's much easier to cut the neck pocket and line everything up with the body while the neck is still flat. This is where things start to get new for me. This body is going to be comprised of 5 pieces. So from bottom to top, it'll have Okoume, then a thin layer of flamed maple, then the piece I'm working on here, which is the main wood in Sapele, another thin layer of flamed maple, and then a top in Okoume that matches the back. And because the Sapele is not the lightest of woods, I'm taking the opportunity to do some lightweight relief and removing some of it. The plan is to make the thickness of the top and the back about 1.5mm thicker than the depth of the binding that I'm going to install on both the top and the back of this guitar. So when I add a veneer layer in between the top and the body, and the back and the body, that should give me a really nice pinstripe effect all around the edge of the guitar. Then I should have about 1.5mm of Okoume, and then I should have the flamed maple binding. So the edge of the guitar is going to be a really standout piece for this build. That's the idea anyway. I've cut the top a little bit oversized so that I can glue it onto the body and use a router to flush it up around the edge. And I can just check that everything is perfect and how I want it before I go ahead and repeat the whole process for the back of the guitar. This is the most critical part of any build to get right, getting the neck and body alignment perfect and the neck pocket nice and snug. So I really spend the time here just to make sure everything is perfect before I go ahead and cut the neck pocket, because I know that by getting this part right, everything that follows will be perfect. It's a wonderful feeling when you take the time to make sure you've measured and marked everything correctly, and then you test fit it and it's perfect. I have said it previously in videos, but guitar building, in fact all of woodworking, is much more about patience than skill a lot of the time to get the right result. And with the binding channel cut, I can now finally see what the edge of the guitar is going to look like with this multi-layer effect. So I can move on to heat bending the wood and installing the double flamed maple binding. At this point I've only used wood binding on a couple of guitars, but I really love the process of heat bending and installing wood binding. And depending on the wood that you pick, it makes a huge difference to the finished look of the guitar. I can't imagine ever wanting to go back to using a plastic binding. Because I only used a thin piece of stock to do the initial neck, I need to just add a small block onto the neck heel in order to be able to make it a seamless transition between the neck and the body. So I'm using an offcut of the same sapele from the neck to keep it all looking the same. Then I can simply deepen the neck pocket that I've already cut and move on to marking up where everything's going to be on the body. I'm using a Schaller 3D6 bridge for this guitar because I find them super comfy and they have a ton of adjustment for both the intonation and for the saddles. The pickups are going to be Bareknuckle Bootcamp Old Guard P90s, which are their lowest output vintage voice pickups, and they're my favourite P90s. I'm going to use cream covered pickups to match nicely with the flamed maple binding, and everything else is going to be in chrome. To keep things clean and simple, I'll pop a single tone, volume and a 3-way switch on this guitar. With the cavities completed, I can move on to what's probably the best part of the build, carving that perfect C-profile neck, before then carving in the headstock and the heel transitions. I just need to get the overall neck thickness correct first, then I can move on to marking up for the calves, which I'll do by cutting 3 facets on either side of the neck for a total of 6, and bring it to the final shape using sandpaper. It's much easier to get those final touches done to the fretwork before the neck's glued in, so I'll do that first and then glue the neck. And once the neck is in and glued, I can get to carving a super comfy, seamless transition between the neck and the body. With the neck in place, I can take the final measurements and do a shallow recess for the bridge. The shallow 3D6 has got a minimum height of around 12mm off the top of the guitar, but I like the strings to be around 10mm off the body at their lowest setting, which is what Fender use. So that's why I'm just recessing this one slightly. It's only to do with comfort. And with the logo lasered into the headstock, it's time to move on to the most rewarding part of the whole build, finishing. This is where all of your wood choices and the woodworking project transforms into the image that you had in your head, hopefully transforms into the image you had in your head at the start. And thankfully, I'm so happy with the way that these ideas have turned out. So the last thing left to do is the final assembly and the setup. And I couldn't resist just having a quick noodle on some high gain settings before I actually moved to do a clean sound demo, so forgive me that. I couldn't resist that, but let's have a quick run through the different settings.